Strangest date. I've been on some weird dates in the past, but this one was the weirdest experience. It may not seem as creepy to some, but the situation was highly uncomfortable. Keep in mind, I wasn't the brightest at 23. Being so naive, I made bad choices that could endanger myself. I was single and I used a common dating site. I come across this guy, Jeff, and we chatted for a while. He was impressed with my profile, super enthusiastic. Jeff was a few years older than me. He was cute and seemed like a nice guy, so he asked me out and would pick me up at my place. When he picked me up, I jumped into his car and we chatted a bit. I noticed he had a katana, a Japanese sword, in his car right in the middle of the front seats. I asked him about it and he said it was for his own protection. I wasn't scared of the sword, it looked more like a cheap decoration. I thought that was weird because how are you supposed to use a long weapon like that inside the car? During our chat, he seemed nervous and awkward, but I assumed it was because of anxiety in meeting me. We went out to eat and he was still nervous or wouldn't make direct eye contact. He was insecure, which made me feel better since I knew he wasn't threatening. After we ate, he told me he had something to tell me. He drives off to a private parking to look out at the inlet. It was weird and I started to get concerned now, since he had to park somewhere private. He then goes on to tell me he's a pedophile. At this point, I don't know what to say and I just listen. He goes on to say he was talking to a 14-year-old girl and they were going to meet up to have sex. Turns out the FBI were there instead. He had to go through tons of therapy for it. Even after that date, he would contact me daily. He had no social life aside from a rare few friends or acquaintances. I didn't want to see much of him because he just weirded me out. His facial expressions were so forced, I don't know, as if blinking his eyes were difficult, and his expressions, to me, were abnormal. I never seen anything like it. He didn't seem mentally sound at all. He also didn't understand sarcasm, and took me quite literally, which was just really confusing. I told my mom about him, and she said he didn't seem normal at all. She told me I should get him off my back permanently by making up a lie that I was seeing my ex and that I didn't want to talk to him anymore. Luckily it worked and he stopped contacting me. However, if he sees me on dating sites, he'll always send me a message if I don't block him first. I feel bad for him, but I got creepy vibes from him, and he was far too desperate for company. I certainly didn't want a stalker. Let's not meet, Jeff. Bad date in the big city. Hi, first post on Reddit. Been a big fan of the sub for a while now, and decided to share one of my creeper stories. I have a few, as I live in a large metropolitan area and seem to be a creeper magnet. I'm female for reference, but I think this is my best one. I was 18 years old, and I just moved to big city for university. It was my first month there, and I was a little shell-shocked from meeting the hordes of new people. So I was just ambling about in a haze, going to classes and exploring the campus. One day I was walking near the local dental school when a man stopped me. "Excuse me, hi. I just wanted to tell you you're very beautiful." He was relatively normal looking, maybe 8 to 10 years older than me, not unattractive, and didn't give off cray-cray vibes, so I preened a little and said thanks. I was wondering if I could take you out to dinner. Now, I wasn't sheltered and I didn't grow up in a small town, but I didn't grow up in a big city either, so I just sort of assumed everyone in the big city was this forward, and I agreed. He explained that he didn't live in the area and was only there getting dental work, and we exchanged numbers and parted ways. I was pretty excited and went back to my dorm and told my roommates. None of them were particularly thrilled that I agreed to go on a date with a total stranger, but I told them it was fine, and I guess I was pretty convincing. Later the guy called and we set up our date. Now it was the evening of the date, when things started to get a little weird. We were going to the traditional dinner and a movie, and he offered to pick me up, but I declined, explaining that my roommate would drop me off. He argued a little, even suggesting my roommate drop me off at his apartment, and he would drive me from there. But I held firm, and he eventually gave up. I asked where should I meet him, since her dropping me off at his apartment was out of the question. "Okay, well, I'm at a big fancy mall right now." "Cool. My roommate is going that way anyways." She dropped me off at the big fancy mall, and then left to meet her family. She was going to be out of reach for the rest of the night. I met the guy at one of the entrances, and he had a rose in a glass vase for me. I thought it was sweet. In retrospect, it was actually a little off-putting, but I'd never been on a grown-up date before, and I sort of thought that was how they worked. I thanked him, and we started discussing where to eat and what time to see the movie. Well, I was really hoping I could take you to the other fancy mall in a completely different area of town. It's really beautiful and would make a better date. No thanks. I've been there. Let's stay here. He protested a little more. Come on. His car was right there. It would only be a short drive, blah blah blah. I stood firm. Finally, we walked around the food court and picked a place to eat. I was pretty happy with my meal and happy I'd gotten my way, and I thought the date was going okay. During dinner, though, his behavior started getting increasingly manic. He was twitching, talking a mile a minute, and could not stop sniffing and rubbing his nose. I felt like I was in an after-school special on how to tell when someone had snorted a bunch of cocaine. Still, it was a big city where people did that sort of thing, so I just hung out and put up with it. I guess I really wanted to see Superbad. After dinner, we got to the movie theater and everything was good. He didn't creep on me during the movie, and I was really enjoying it. He did, however, disappear for 20 minutes in the middle of the movie. When he came back, he was stumbling and his head lolled onto my shoulder. As the movie ended, I excused myself and called my other roommate from the ladies' room. Unfortunately, she was still at home with no car and didn't know anyone with a car, so the best thing she could do was give me a number for a taxi service, which I called. After some confusion, whereupon a kindly stranger who had heard both of my conversations ended up giving me the address of the mall and directions for the taxi driver, I arranged to be picked up. I explained to my date that I had a taxi coming and set off at a determined pace for the entrance where I was being picked up. He followed, protesting all the while that he could drive me home. It wasn't very convincing, as his speech was slurring and he couldn't walk straight. Finally, we were almost there, and he was arguing, trying to convince me not to leave, when a security guard stopped me and said, "Hey, listen, that guy that you're with slurring and stumbling, are you okay?" I said that yes, I was fine, but that I need to get to my cab, and I need to get to it alone, and the guard took my data and made him sit down. My last vision of him was him staring angrily at me, while still holding the vase with the rose. I made it to the taxi without further incident, only to receive a barrage of phone calls and voicemails. "Where did you go?" "Come back!" "You forgot your rose." "This is really uncool." "Fuck you, you bitch." That was the end of it, thankfully. I never heard from him again, and I've never had another day like that. It made for a great story later, and served as a pretty solid introduction to a big city. Looking back, I should have left right away or just not gone on the date. He never stopped trying to convince me to get to his car, and he was on both uppers and downers over the course of the night. I still don't have a good explanation for why I stayed. I guess I just really wanted to see Superbad. Illuminati Tinder Weirdo. So in November of 2016, I went through a pretty bad breakup. In October 2017, I finally felt comfortable enough to try to get back into the dating world. So like a moron, I got on Tinder, and it wasn't my first rodeo with Tinder, but this was the strangest thing that happened to me. So towards the end of October, I met a guy named Dave on Tinder, and from the looks of it, he was an okay guy. He was funny and a gentleman, didn't ask for anything inappropriate, it seemed fine. We talked for about 2 weeks and set up a time to go on a date. We decided to meet in the city where he had recently moved to, which was about 35 minutes away from my house. I got to the bar to wait for him, and he was 15 minutes late. He walked in and looked relatively similar to his pictures, which I was happy about, and then he opened his mouth to talk and he had a strange voice, like he was always on the verge of crying. Very weird. He had some tattoos on his arm, including the all-seeing eye, Illuminati symbol. Trying to break the tension, I jokingly said, "Illuminati confirmed, tell me all your secrets," and he goes, "What the hell are you talking about? Don't say that kind of stuff in public." I just kind of laughed it off, and he was being really weird. He then says, "You know that people who pry are people who die." I just looked at him, and I genuinely did not know how to respond. Fast forward about 20 minutes, and a couple of my friends come to the bar at my urging. I moved to sit on the same side as him, so that my friends could sit on the same side of the booth. The minute I sit down, he puts his hand on my knee and squeezes, and not like, "Oh, I'm interested," but a hard fucking squeeze. I looked at him to stop, and he leans over and whispers, "You have lovely kneecaps." Like, boy, what? By the time my friends left, which was about an hour into the date, he had 7 beers. It was a Tuesday. As I go to close my tab, he stands behind me, and he had a boner, full-mast boner. I very quickly signed my receipt and stepped away, As I'm getting ready to say goodbye, it starts raining, and he informs me that he walked to the bar from his house and asked for a ride home. Reluctantly, I agreed, and on the very short drive to his house, he informs me that it's not actually his house, and that he's living in his sister's basement. When I finally park in front of his house, he leans over to kiss me, and I try to give him the cheek, and he physically turns my head and puts his entire tongue in my mouth. And I pulled away, and the guy did it again. I finally pulled away and said, "Get the fuck out of my car." And he responds with, "I'm in love with you. I knew from the moment I saw your pictures. You have to come inside and meet my sister and her husband." I told him that if he didn't get out of my car, I was calling the police. And he started tearing up and got out of my car. So weird, boner. Illuminati guy. Let's not meet. Someone repeatedly breaks into a room and leaves gifts. This happened to a close friend and housemate of mine whilst at university. I'll call her Laura for the purpose of this story. We were in our second year of university, and while it is typical to move out of halls and into house during second year, for financial reasons, we both decided to apply to stay in our halls of residence again. We attended the University of York in the UK, and chose the college just behind the library, due to the ensuite bathrooms and the close location to Heslington West. The halls were 3 floors high, with 10 people living on each floor, and everyone seemed pretty nice. Everyone had a key card, which you had to use to access the main building, and again to access your floor. And the only other way to access the building was if you ran the buzzer, and someone physically came and opened the door. If you lost your key card, you had to report it to the porter, and it would instantly be cancelled, so it no longer worked and you would have to issue a new one. Now I've described our living situation. I'll proceed with the story. Term started off normally enough. My friend and I were both on the same course, genetics, and we attended our lectures, did society stuff, went to the library, and etc. We were a fan of midnight library trips, and one day we came back from the library around 2 a.m. in the morning. We buzzed ourselves in, went into the lift to the second floor, and headed to our respective rooms to sleep. I was brushing my teeth maybe 5 minutes later, and there was a knock on my door. I answered it, and Laura came in with a confused expression and asked me to come to her room with her. I followed her, and she went over to her desk and picked up an origami swan. She swore she hadn't made it, and that it hadn't been there before our library trip. She asked me if I put it in there at any point, but I'd never seen it before. Whilst we used cards to buzz ourselves through the door system, we unlocked our personal rooms with a key. I asked her if she'd locked her room before going out, and she insisted that she had. I told her that she must have forgotten and left it unlocked accidentally, and that it would just be one of our roommates prattling around. It's not uncommon for people to prank each other at university. During my first year, our roommate had left his room unlocked, so we went and wrapped all his stuff in tinfoil. Lara was still looking a bit worried, however, but I told her not to worry, and she agreed that a paper swan was innocent enough, so she let it go and we both went to bed. Around a week and a half had passed, and we were both busy with university, so we'd pretty much forgotten about the weird origami swan incidents. In this time, Laura had asked all of our housemates about it, but no one had owned up to it, so we decided that it was definitely a housemate messing around, but not wanting to admit it. One day, we had a gap between our morning lectures and a laboratory session in the afternoon, so we came home to make some lunch. I was making a sandwich in the kitchen, chatting with a couple of our other housemates, and Laura came in. She was carrying another origami swan and a ribbon. She said the ribbon had been around her door handle, and that the swan had been on her desk again. This time I knew she'd locked her door, as we headed out at our 9 a.m. lecture together that morning, and I'd seen her do it. I was a bit confused, but I still insisted that it had to be one of our housemates messing around, because no one else could get in that corridor due to the door card system. Laura agreed with me, but was still concerned because she knew she lost her key whilst drunk during Freshers Week. I hadn't known this, but apparently a few days into term, we had been on a night out to a club, and the next morning Laura hadn't been able to find her key. She said she figured she must have lost it in the club somewhere, and had immediately gone to the porters and paid the fine to collect the new key. They told her just hand the missing one in if it turned up. So now, Laura was thinking that maybe one of her housemates had the key, had realized it unlocked Laura's room, and was putting stuff in there as some kind of practical joke. Laura, however, didn't see the funny side of someone doing that and going into her room, and thought it was a bit too weird and specific to be a practical joke. She decided to give everyone the benefit of the doubt though, and took a picture of the swan and posted it on Facebook in her house group chat, saying, "Nice swan, lol, thanks guys. I'd appreciate it if you stopped coming into my room now though." But they didn't stop going into her room. Over the next few weeks, whoever kept entering her room did so more frequently. They'd still leave the weird-ass swans, but other things started happening too. For example, Laura would leave her laptop in a certain place on her desk, but when she came back it would be on her pillow, and the clothes in her wardrobe would be rearranged, and books would be left out that she hadn't been reading. Again, it was nothing particularly sinister, but it was really freaking Laura out now, and she was beginning to doubt herself. She did often say that maybe she had left her laptop on her pillow, and that she was just worrying because of the swan thing. It got to the point where she had to have me look at her room before we leave for lectures, and had me watch her physically lock the door, but Laura wasn't losing it. Things were really moving around her room while she was gone, and someone was definitely going in there. This time, I posted a massive rant about it on the Facebook chat. All of our housemates absolutely swore it wasn't them, and that they keep an eye out on it, and honestly, none of them gave a particularly creepy vibe, and all seemed genuinely nice. However, we knew it either had to be one of our roommates or a friend or partner that someone was letting into the building, as there was no way at all of entering without one of those active key cards. This went on for a few more weeks, and eventually I urged her to tell the campus security what was going on, especially about the weird swan thing. There were no security cameras inside the building, however, and they said they would keep a close eye and that they would increase their car patrols around our area of college. Laura thanked them, but she wasn't convinced this would be much help, seeing as she was convinced it was someone inside the house. She also informed the college dean, and individually all 30 people in that block were called in to talk to the dean if they knew anything about it. Nothing came out of it, but Laura was glad that the university were taking the situation seriously. Now this is where things get really creepy. The person was still moving around things in her room, and was also leaving the occasional paper swan, but now they were leaving notes. It started with short notes on her pillow, such as, "You are pretty," but soon turned into full-blown letters detailing how this person had been watching Laura since the beginning of the term, how much they liked her, and how they knew that she liked them too because she always accepted their gifts. Naturally, Laura was seriously distressed by this point. She even considered moving out and staying somewhere else, and she ended up going to the opens doors because she had severe anxiety and paranoia about this. It got to the point where she rarely left her room, and the only person she would allow to enter was me. She stopped going to lectures and to lacrosse society, which she loved because she said she felt like she could feel eyes on her at all times, and was genuinely terrified someone might follow her and do something. If she had to go anywhere alone for any reason, she called me to come and meet her. She spent a lot of time crying, and she was even struggling to complete essays and keep up with the university stuff. I told her to keep all the letters, but she didn't want them in her room, so I looked after them and gave them to the dean people, who ended up getting the police involved. Again, the police questioned us all, but nothing came of it. Finally, the university offered to change her door and have a new lock fitted. So, she had a new lock fitted, but the letters didn't stop. Instead, they just ended up getting pushed under her door when she was out. They became more and more graphic and sexual in nature, with them stating in general detail exactly what their life together would be like, and what they'd do in the bedroom. We were well into the second term by this point, and Laura was really struggling to cope. She deleted all her social media accounts, and she failed on a couple of assignments due to the stress, but Laura was desperate not to quit, as she wanted to do well at her degree and didn't want anyone to let her down like that. We were still no closer to knowing who it was, however, and the only comforting thing was that the person couldn't use the missing key to access her room anymore. Anyways, the letters continued, and finally, a letter came asking her to meet up. The person asked Laura to meet at 11 p.m. near Central Hall in general. Your campus is pretty well lit and pretty safe due to the security patrols, with very few incidences taking place. Central Hall, however, was the one area of campus that really wasn't well lit, and it was in fact pretty dark. What's more, the entrance of Central Hall doesn't have any security cameras, so basically this person had asked to meet Laura in the dark, with no security at all. Obviously, Laura didn't attend the 11 p.m. date, and instead reported it to the campus security. Security checked the area out, but no one turned up. After that, she received a letter asking her to meet up most days, and by this point, Laura was at breaking point. She phoned her mom and admitted what had been going on for the past few months. Her mom insisted she was driving up the next day to talk to the college dean about the situation and told Laura that under no circumstances she would be staying in those halls anymore. Eventually, Laura agreed to take a medical leave of absence, due to come back the following academic year. As September drew near, she made the decision not to come back. Though, through text, she told me nothing weird at all had happened since she'd gone back home, but that she felt too afraid to come back to York, and that she was still experiencing bad anxiety whenever she left the house. I have seen Laura since, and though she's doing okay now, the whole situation will be with her for her life. After the whole situation with Laura, no one else in our flat was ever targeted and nothing odd happened, but I pretty much avoided all of our housemates, knowing that one of them, or someone close to them, had to be responsible for stalking Laura and causing the deterioration of her mental health. We still genuinely have no idea who was responsible for any of it, and I guess now we will never know. So, creepy person out there, stay the hell away from Laura and please God, let's never ever meet, even though we probably already have. My Tinder date tried to kill me. So hey guys, I've been lurking in the sub for like 2 years now, and thanks to the wonders of the online dating, I finally have quite the story to share with you. I use Tinder pretty frequently and it's usually cool, just meeting people chillin', smoking with most of them. So I matched with this dude named Charlie and he seems cool. He's really cute and he plays music, which is really appealing to me, as I also sing and play piano. We talked for a little while, and I agreed to meet him at his house. Mistake number 1. Why did I think it was a good idea to meet a stranger in their home? I don't drive, so I take an Uber over and it's a decent way away, so it's kinda pricey. When he buzzes me into the apartment complex, I got this really creepy vibe, but I shook it off as nerves. I go up to the 3rd floor and he's standing at the door. Things are cool. We're just chillin', we smoked a couple of bowls and we're watching a movie. So he makes a move on me and I go with it. We end up on the bed and we're obviously engaging in adult activities, when out of nowhere, he wraps his hand around my neck, hard. Now, that's all fine and good with me. I mean, I can dig that in the right setting, but alone in a stranger's house, when he didn't even check to see if it was cool, is not one of those settings. So I literally can't breathe, and I'm certainly certain I'm turning blue at this point, and he's just relentless. Not only is he like suffocating me, he's now yelling in my face, "Are you scared?" with his wild look in his eyes, and I'm like, fuck yes, I am scared. You are trying to kill me right now. I started to struggle, and he was gripping even harder now. I'm not even kidding you guys. Seriously, I thought I was going to die. By some miracle, I wriggle out of his grasp, and he starts screaming. He's yelling at me to calm down, and I'm frantically trying to put on my clothes. He grabs my wrist as I'm trying to leave, and I use all of my strength to pull away and slam the door. As it was closing, the charming fella bid me adieu with the words, "Fucking cunt." I get home and I look in the mirror, and I have hella bruises on my neck. I tried to cover it up with makeup to no avail. I straight up looked like I was almost strangled to death. Then he texts me saying, "I think you need more than one dick." And I'm like, oh really? You want to bring a friend and kill me together? How lovely. Anyways, I blocked him and reported him on Tinder. I wish I could have done more because I seriously think he would have killed me. I've been debating going to the police, but the bruises are gone, and it's a he said, she said thing, you know? But I'm really starting to wonder if I should, because the next girl might not be so lucky. 0 out of 10 would not attempted murder again. Crazy Strangler Tinder dude. Let's not meet. Homecoming forced date. As a high school freshman, I was in advanced mathematics course and ended up sitting next to an older senior. He didn't pick up math as well, so sometimes he would ask me for help explaining coursework. We talked some, but never outside of class. He seemed pretty nice, if a bit socially awkward. At some point, he started acting a bit weird though. and I was getting some bad vibes about it. As homecoming approached, he asked me to go as his dates, and a light went on in my head. Oh, I'm getting bad vibes because he's into me. I'm mostly a romantic and asexual, which means I'm completely uninterested in people sexually, and almost entirely not interested in them romantically as well. I let him know that I was going with a group of friends, and wouldn't be taking a date, but if he didn't have a group to go with, he could join us. He agreed, although he seemed disappointed that I turned him down for a date. The situation got weird a few nights later, when I suddenly got a call from him after midnight. I never gave him my phone number, and my cell phone wasn't registered in the phone book. To this day, I do not know how he got it. He told me that he was outside my house and wanted me to show him what I was wearing. Obviously creeped out, I replied in a pretty tense tone, asking him to repeat the question. I didn't think I heard him right. He seemed to be caught off guard, and took a minute to compose himself. Then he said he wanted to know the color of my dress for homecoming because his mom wanted to know. I told him I didn't know what color it was, because I hadn't picked one out yet. He told me what color his suit was going to be, and awkwardly hung up the phone. I stood behind the wall and looked outside my window, seeing a car out there with its headlights on. It stayed on my driveway for 15 minutes, after he hung up and then drove away. This was many years ago now, so I don't remember all the details of the dance. But what I do remember is that when I got to the dance, he cornered me and his mom suddenly appeared behind me. They had apparently prepared a corsage and put it on me without asking, even though I made it very clear that this was not a date, and he had acknowledged that. During the dance, he also pressured me into taking photos with him, saying his mom would be upset if he didn't get any couple photos, even though we came with a group of other people. During the dance, I tried to hang out around my friends as much as possible, as they were talking to him as well. Near the end, I got lost in the crowd because I was worried he would try to follow me, and he was looking for me after. I slept out and drove home right away, and tried not to talk to him for the rest of the year. Luckily, I didn't have any interactions with him after that. Never using online dating ever again. Okay, so I've never posted on here before, but I always read and I love to comment on people's stories. Unfortunately, I quite recently have a very scary, more like terrifying encounter. Now for some background information, I live in a small apartment complex right outside my campus with some friends. I am also a 20-year-old girl. So, all of my friends were always bashing on me for never meeting up with any boys or going. I didn't want to be the little friend who stayed home and eat pizza, though, while my friends were out on dates with boys, so I signed up for Plenty of Fish. Now, I am not the type of person who would say yes to any random stranger. They had to be nice looking, they had to have plenty of photos of themselves, and we had to have at least 2 common interests. So, with those rules in my head, I psyched myself up to join the world of online dating. Within a few days, I already had 2 boys I was talking to. One said he was a doctor, and one said he was a construction guy. I didn't like that the doctor guy was lying to me. I mean, he was like 20 years old though. But one day, the construction guy, who'll call Dan, messaged me on a messaging app we were using and asked if I wanted to go out and grab a bite to eat. I told my roommates where I was going, who I was with, all the things someone should do, so that if you get abducted, people can still find you. I even had a check-in time, so that my roommate texted me if things were good. I had to say some silly code word that meant things were good. If I responded another code word, it meant help me get out of this. And if I didn't use code words, then she would call the police for help. So I quickly dolled myself up and got ready for my date. I put my hair up in a classy bun, leaving strips of it hanging down around my glasses. I put on a nice white blouse and some black pants, and I was ready to go. I jumped in my car and headed out to the restaurant where Dan had chosen. It was just out of my town, but it was still only a 15-minute drive from my apartment. I arrived at the restaurant and saw him almost immediately. He was wearing nice clothes and looked just like his photos. He was waiting just outside the restaurant doors for me. His eyes lit up when he saw me. He walked over to me and smiled. We chatted a little bit outside and then walked inside. We ate dinner and talked about our life and things like how school was going. I got the text from my friend, but since everything was all good, I sent that code word back. Dan talked about how much he liked his job and things, and altogether it was pretty nice. Except for one thing. Dan was boring. He didn't do anything exciting or really talk enthusiastic about anything, and it was boring. It was an average date, and I honestly didn't care to go on anymore. The next day, I woke up to the feeling of my phone vibrating nonstop. I looked at it and realized it was vibrating so much that it had fallen off my dresser. I almost laughed. Then I saw the messages were from Dan. At first, they were saying how much fun he had had and that he would like to go with me again, but then the messages took a turn. They got violent and angry that I wasn't responding. It was 7 in the fucking morning. I was sleeping. I noped out of the situation. I texted him back and said that I had been sleeping and no, I would not go on any more dates with him. I was just about to block his profile on both sites when I got a final message. Watch your back. At first, I was really creeped out, but then I thought that since I had blocked him and all my accounts were deleted that he could do nothing. Wrong. Later that day, I saw a text from a random number telling me how pretty I looked in my blue PJs. I glanced outside just in time to see no other than Dan running down my road. How the hell did he get my number? I thought wearily, blocking that number and continued what I was doing. Later that night, I fell asleep pretty early and woke up to my phone text alert going crazy. It was from the number I had just blocked earlier that day. There were dozens of messages saying how I was going to get it. I quickly showed all my roommates the messages. They all told me that I should go to the police, but since I was a stupid person, I didn't. I blocked the number again and went back to sleep, but once again I woke up to my phone buzzing. I didn't wait. I jumped in my car and drove all the way to the police station. Once there, they told me that they couldn't do much to help me, and just told me to block the number. I did. At least I had it on record. Nothing happened for a few days. The number stayed blocked on my phone for a while, and then the pictures started. They were pictures of my house, of me in my house, of my car, of my work. I went back to the police, and finally, I was able to get a restraining order against Dan. I never received any messages from Dan again after that. I now never use dating sites. So Dan, let's hope we never meet again. If anyone has any tips for staying safer, please let me know. Photos of us. Throwaway account. So a little background first. I met my girlfriend about 7 months ago while I was in my first year of college and she was in her last year of high school. She is originally from China and moved to the country I live in about 3 years ago for school. Right now she is back in China for a few months to visit her family before she starts college. Today I got off work and noticed my girlfriend had messaged me a ton on QQ. It's the Chinese social network. It was strange to me since she had gone to sleep at about 9 a.m. my time and told me she'd be up at around 4 p.m. It says she has sent me a ton of messages around 1 p.m. Normally she would not do anything like this, so I knew something strange was up. So I opened my phone thinking she likely had just had a bad dream or something like that, but nothing prepared me for what I was about to see. She messaged me in a very distressed and confused tone, saying that I should look on this Chinese forum post this anonymous guy sent her, since there was photos of us on there. I first thought she meant just photos off of QQ that she posted of us, since we had people steal photos from there before. I opened up the link she sent me and suddenly, I felt my whole body freeze up because of what I saw photos of us. Hundreds of them, taken by someone else. The first few photos looked like someone had just taken them from behind us while we were walking together. The more I scrolled, the creepier it got. Photos of us at parks, on the bus, at the movie theater, at the mall, at a sushi restaurant, pretty much every single public place I'd ever been with her. I was creeped out completely by this point. This person seemed to have taken photos of us every time we went on a date together, but it got worse. I scrolled more and found a photo of just me using a stall in a public washroom. It looked like they had taken it by putting their camera over the wall of the stall beside me. There were photos of the exact same thing, but with my girlfriend, though. I felt sick to my stomach looking at these, but then I saw the worst photos of them all. Photos of us in my room hanging out, sleeping together and having sex. My room was on the 5th floor of the residence at the college I was at, with no buildings facing it. I normally kept my blinds open all the time because I liked the sunlight and did not fear anyone looking in. It looked like they had taken from a similar height my room was at. The only thing I could think was they took these photos without using some ridiculous, like a helicopter was if their camera had incredible zoom or something, you know? I asked my girlfriend if she had ever noticed anyone stalking us, and she said no. I have no idea how we could have never noticed this person stalking us everywhere. It seemed to be that only one person did this though, since the photos of me and my girlfriend individually never seemed to occur during the same time. I am currently trying to contact authorities about this, but I am unsure how much they could help, or even if they can find out who stalked us. But if I find out anything, I will post an update about it here. So, creepy stalker person with a camera, let's not meet. The Deadliest X. So this took place over a few years in a small Ohio town. I went to a real small high school and was all around pretty sheltered. I went on some dates, but never really had a real boyfriend until Dave came along. Dave was a popular senior, I was a junior, and many of his friends were dating my friends. Dave was a funny guy and a bit of a troublemaker, but he was very sweet to me. We hit it off and began dating. Dave lived with his foster dad, a man named Greg whom he lived with since age 13 or so. Greg was not married, so just them and their dog. Greg worked as a counselor for an adolescent's mental health center in town, and he was literally the kindest person I've ever met. I was interested in pursuing a similar field, so I really enjoyed spending time talking with Greg. At first, it was smooth sailing with Dave, but slowly things just got worse. Dave confessed to me that he was very depressed and often thought about killing himself. I was shocked and upset. I wasn't sure how to help. I told Greg about it, who assured me he would take care of things. He let me know that Dave had some mental issues and had been suicidal before. Now, I realized that could be a relationship red flag, but as it was my first boyfriend, and I had also gone through some depression issues, I just felt obligated to help him through this time. I should add that Dave had previously told me a few very private stories about his abusive childhood, so overall I just felt really bad for him. As time went on, Dave became worse. He was verbally abusive and very sneaky. I was petrified of the dark, and he would delight in sneaking up and shutting all the lights off whenever we were in a windowless area. He lived a street apart, and at one point he began sneaking to my home at nighttime and asking me to let him sleep over. My dumb high school self did. I just continued to feel obligated to help this guy until one day, I finally got the guts to cut things off. I told him it was over the day I graduated. I said I wanted to move on to a new stage in my life and all that. He begged and begged, saying he would do better. I didn't buy it and basically told him I didn't want any type of contact. Of course, he threatened suicide over and over via text, but I finally got the strength to ignore it. I found out later Greg had caught Dave taking Greg's gun from safe, but nothing tragic happened. Now this is where shit gets real. I moved to a town 25 minutes away to attend school. My roommate Jenny was a high school friend who happened to be dating a scumbag from our hometown who sold drugs. Since this dude was still in high school and couldn't drive, he didn't really come over, but she would go stay with him. She would come back and tell me she saw Dave buying drugs from her boyfriend, and Dave would always ask about me all creepy and stuff. She knew better than to tell him stuff, especially when he asked where our new place was. And thank goodness, because what happened next still gives me chill. One April night, I get a call from my mom. She said I need to get out of my apartment and stay with a friend because Dave had just killed someone and was still on the loose. I asked what had happened, and my mom told me the unthinkable. Greg had been found in his basement freezer. Dave had beat him to death, then escaped before anyone discovered the body. I could hardly believe the gruesome news and immediately left my apartment. The next afternoon, I received the news that Dave had been caught. They found him at a rundown motel a few miles from my apartment. I'll never know if Dave was coming for me, but my gut tells me he was. I mean, if this dude was on a killing spree, I'd no doubt I'd be a second target. I wanted so badly to know the truth. I went to a visitation while he was still in the county jail, one of those glass with a phone sort of thing, but once I got there, I just broke. I couldn't pick up the phone, and plus, there were others there to talk to him. I never did get the chance to ask, but I'll never forget as the officers led him back to his cell. He turned one last time and looked me dead in the eye. Still gives me shivers. I never knew about his previous crimes until this occurred. There had been previous crimes. If only I or my parents had gotten a background check on this guy. I urge all parents to do so. In this day and age, you can never be too careful. Standing in my closet. I posted one of my stories on here at the request of a friend. It's long, sorry. As I said in my previous post, I have horrible luck, and I seem to be a creep magnet. Every guy I've ever dated has turned into like a complete weirdo, and I've been stalked several times. I have no idea why this happens to me, but I don't date anymore as a result. This was my final attempt at dating and the worst instance of a guy flipping his shit on me. I moved out of state for college, and in my freshman year I met a guy, we'll call him Brian. Brian was 3 years older than me, mature, attractive, funny, and everything I could ever ask for. I met him at a coffee shop across from campus, and we instantly connected. I was wary of actually committing though because of my bad history with guys. We talked and hung out for almost 2 months before I finally let him kiss me, and 3 more months before I let him do anything else. It was his patience and all of this that really won me over, but I kind of regret that mentality now. By the start of my second year, my friend and I had gotten jobs that paid enough for us to get an apartment near campus. We were thrilled to finally be out of the dorms, and while moving, my assignment kind of overshadowed my relationship for a while. First red flag. It was our 3rd night in our new apartment, and I realized I hadn't spoken to Brian in 2 days. I sent him a text apologizing, explaining that we had been busy getting everything set up. He didn't respond, so I sent him several more texts. Still no response. I went to bed a little worried about him, but I had an early class the next day, followed by a full shift at my work. I was awoken by my phone going off at 1 a.m. It was Brian. I answered, and on the other line I could hear him crying. I instantly worried that he was in trouble, and I started the typical questions. Are you okay? Where are you? What's going on? Do you need help? He didn't respond for a while, but then said, I'm sitting in the bath. If you don't want to be with me, I'll understand. And don't take it personally if I do something stupid. I don't want you blaming yourself. Okay? Then he hung up. I had his roommate's number and I immediately called him to get him to stop whatever Brian had planned. He answered, and after I told him what was going on, he went to the bathroom, where he didn't find anything, and then he went to Brian's room, where he also found nothing. I could hear him calling around the apartment, and then I heard Brian in the background. I was out having a smoke, I heard him say. Then I heard his roommate explain that I had called, was on the line, and what I told him. I heard Brian make an angry noise and then say, that stupid fucking bitch, we got into a fight, and she's trying to cause problems. Fucking crazy whore. Just hang up. He did. I felt numb after what I listened to, and wasn't sure how to process it. The tiny voice in the back of my mind told me to delete his number, and never to speak to him again. But I, of course, didn't listen. We didn't speak for a week, but he finally called me and explained that he had said what he had, because he didn't want his roommate to know what he had been thinking about hurting himself. He used the excuse that guys don't want their friends knowing they're vulnerable like that. I bought the story and life went on as usual. It wasn't the same though. I felt really weird around him, and I knew what had happened was something to be concerned about. He started to get worse and worse about things, showing up at my work even when I wasn't there and asking my coworkers about stuff like, where does she go for lunch? Who does she talk to? Does she flirt with people coming in? Is she close to anyone? It actually got me into some trouble, and he was asked to not come into the store anymore. I confronted him about it, and he said he thought that maybe I was cheating. I knew I had to get out ASAP, but I'm really awkward when it comes to breaking out with people. I've had so many bad breakups that it's actually caused me quite a bit of anxiety when I know I have to do it again. I plan on staying in the relationship, hoping that things will change till I saw the perfect opportunity to cut things off. I, of course, talked to my friend about it. We had been friends since 3rd grade, and she has always been there to help me out in trouble. She suggested slowly easing him out by putting more and more distance between us. It sounded like a good plan, but like always, she wanted to up the ante. She's really into raves and parties and stuff like that, and she begged me to start going out with her. According to her, it would seem like my life was just going in a different direction. I'm not really one for going out, but the idea sounded good to me, so I took her up on the offer. Every night that I didn't have work or didn't have class the next morning, she was dragging me out of the apartment. Each time Brian would text me, I would tell him that I was going out. I did feel bad, but at the same time, I could see that it was working. We didn't really talk anymore, and it was my hope that it would just go away. Oddly enough, I was actually enjoying myself as well. My friend and I rebonded, and it felt nice to let my hair down a little. A month after this tactic started, and me and Brian just dwindled off, till I worked up the courage to break it off completely. He took it well, but was rather aggressive about it. He said that he had already started seeing a girl he had met in a club and that he had already assumed that we were over. I was relieved, but that tiny voice came back again and said that something wasn't right. Brian was rather antisocial, and he had often said he hated the whole club scene. I didn't give it much thought, though. Then one night, I found myself in an overly crowded dance floor, which wasn't out of the norm. It was a well-known DJ, and it was expected to be crowded. I had lost my friend in the crowd, but it didn't bother me too much, till I felt a set of hands wrap their way around my torso, tightly holding me. I couldn't even turn to see who it was, and the music was so loud that no one even noticed my startled yelps. They pushed and pulled against me, groped around me, and then it was over. I quickly turned around, and there were a few guys behind me. I glared at them, sputtered some profanities, ignored the confused looks, and waited out of the crowd. I told my friend what had happened when I was able to find her, and she started a rant about pervs and whatnot. I put it out of my mind till the night came to a close, and me and my friend were making our way back to my car. When I go out, I keep my apartment and car key on a metal clip on my belt, and my keys I flip inward and keep tucked in my pockets. This little system has always worked well for keeping my keys safe, but that night they were gone. I flipped out, went back inside, and asked if anyone had found a set of keys. I didn't even think about whoever had groped me, because I hadn't felt anything around my belt. The two security guys said they hadn't, but that they would check around and see. We waited for about an hour, but nothing turned up. I knew I had a spare key back at the apartment, but I didn't want to leave my car. We called a cab and just planned on going on to get my car in the morning. I was somewhat worried that someone would find my keys and run off with my car, but my friend insisted that it would be okay, that my keys had probably slipped off at some point in the night, and that the cleaning crew would find them. I reluctantly agreed, but my keys were never found. We had another apartment key made, and I used my spare key for my car. Another month went by, and I completely put Brian out of my mind. Till one night, the night I learned that friends can be chicken shit sometimes. It was pretty late, and my friend and I had just gone back to the apartment. As always, she called first dibs on the shower, which I was fine with, because I really like hot showers, to be honest, and always use up all the hot water. I was sitting on my bed waiting for her, when this feeling of being watched started to creep over me. I wrote off the feeling and continued dicking around on my phone, till my friend walked in. She was dressed in her giant wraparound towel, robe, toga thing, and she was drying her hair with another towel. She didn't say anything, though, which was odd, because she usually teased me about my acid bath being all mine, or something along those lines. Not this time, though. This time her head was tilted to one side, as she dried her hair, but her movement had stopped. Friend of the Year award. She gave me an awkward laugh, dropped the towel from her hair, looked at me with a very weird look on her face, and told me to hold on a second. And then she was gone. It really worried me, and I sat there in mild confusion for a few seconds. But then I stood up to go find her. As I passed my closet, from the corner of my eye, through the 1-inch gap, I saw Brian, standing there in the darkness. He was on the far side, and he was partially concealed by clothes, but it was clearly him. He must have known that he was caught, because the other side of my closet began to inch open. I flipped the hell out, of course, and bolted for the front door, which was wide open, because my friend hadn't closed it after she had abandoned me there alone. I found her in the parking lot, still in her towel near our cars. She was already on the phone with 911. I love that she remembered to grab her phone, but didn't think to warn me or anything like that. I still won't let her live that down. The police came, but in a brilliant display of how amazing our system is, didn't do much of anything at all. They said there were no signs of him or any signs of forced entry at all, if anything. I got this vibe from them of stupid girls trying to get some poor guy in trouble. They didn't even go check with him. When they looked in my closet, as if they were able to tell, they said it didn't look like anyone had been in there at all. Both me and my friend knew it was Brian, and we had gotten written off like some kids scared by some imaginary phantom in the closet or something like that. Luckily, our apartment manager did take us seriously and changed the lock on our door. After that, I did call Brian and told him I knew he had been in our apartment. He called me crazy and threatened to get a restraining order because I was harassing him. It didn't stop there, though. For about 2 months, I kept receiving pictures of me. They would be left outside my apartment, on the window of my car. Once, they were left on each step leading down from my apartment, held in place by glue dots. Now, some of the pictures were older, around the time I was breaking things off with Brian, and some were taken only a few days ago before I received them. It unnerved me because some were taken within pretty close proximity to me, and I wasn't even aware that they were being taken. It got to the point that I was scared to be alone anywhere, even in my apartment, and I found myself constantly looking around to see if I could spot him. I knew it was Brian, but after that night with my apartment, I was worried about going to the cops. I did eventually though, and I brought all the pictures with me. This time I had a decent person helping me, and they pulled up the incident at the apartment, and I know that both me and my friend witnessed the same thing. It wasn't enough to do really anything though, because there was no proof that Brian was sending the pictures, but it was enough to get a restraining order. He called me a few days after it was issued, and all he said was, "So I guess we're over then," and then he hung up. He still has my car key, because I have no doubt that he was the person in the club that grabbed me, but I'm usually pretty cautious about always checking the backseat of my car before I get in, so there you have it. Sometimes I still think I see him around, but then again, it could just be paranoia. Delusional sculptor creep was living in my cupboard. 26 female here from India. This happened when I was 16 years old and living in India, in a building that had 3 floors, and 1 flat on each floor. It was not really secure at all. We had a security guard downstairs, but he was drunk most of the time, since he was old and we didn't feel like firing him. It was the end of the summertime, and someone rang on our doorbell one afternoon, and my younger brother opened it. It was a man saying, "Do you want me to sculpt a Ganesha, Hindu god, idol for you?" My brother politely said no and closed the door. We didn't think much about him that day. It became a habit with this guy. He would show up at the same place every afternoon, asking the same question and getting a negative response from either my mom, my brother, or myself. Since he usually left and was extremely polite, we never reported him. Then he stopped coming. He did not come for the next 2 weeks. We forgot about him. The monsoon season had begun by that time. It rained heavily almost every single day. I loved going up to my roof to get drenched in the rain. One afternoon, it was raining outside, and I decided to go up to my roof. There was a huge cupboard at the corner of the stairs which led to the roof, where we kept some household supplies. I went onto the roof, and after 45 minutes of rain-soaked fun, I stepped out. I was dripping wet and soaked the stairs with my wet clothes and feet. I decided to wipe off the water from the stairs, and I opened the cupboard to look for a mop. As I opened it, I saw someone sitting inside. I screamed. It was the idol guy. He calmly said he was busy making Ganesha idols for us and I should join him, and he tried to grab my hand. I slammed the cupboard door shut and ran back downstairs. Nobody was home, so I called my mom and told her what happened. She called the police immediately. I waited in my wet clothes near my door, sitting in the puddle of rainwater my clothes had made. My heart was thumping. Soon I heard the sirens and a couple of policemen rush up to my flat and ask me what happened. I led them to the cupboard. The man had vanished. Only tiny bottles of alcohol and blankets were inside. All their supplies were gone. Maybe he threw those out to make room for himself? We were wondering where he might be, so we made our way to the roof. It was still pouring outside. He went onto the roof, and there he was, completely naked. He was standing with his arms out and chanting prayers and encouraged us to join. The policeman grabbed him and cuffed him. He was still smiling and chanting. He was asked several questions, but he kept chanting. He was taken away by the police, and that was the last I saw of him. I never got to know the details of who he was. The police talked to my parents and said they had taken care of it, and he wouldn't bother us again. To this date, I am still scared of opening cupboards, even if it's my own wardrobe, without tensing up. Crazy ex after my friend. This story starts in 8th grade. My friend had a crush on a boy, and I did too, except the guy I liked was in high school, and the guy my friend Emily liked was in our grade. Emily liked Gavin. Gavin was short and had black hair. I liked Caleb. Caleb was tall, had brown hair, and the only way I got to see him was when I went to my brother's football and basketball games. Skipping ahead to my second year of high school, Caleb was a senior and 2 years older than I was, Emily and Gavin were younger than me, but only by a couple months. Caleb and I started talking in high school, and by this point we were actually dating. It was also a known fact that Emily liked Gavin and Gavin liked her back, but nothing ever came out of it until our senior year of high school, when Gavin asked Emily out. When I turned 23, Caleb proposed to me, and I said yes. We got married a little after that. Gavin and Emily got married after they had their first child. Emily had Xavier when she was 20 and fresh out of high school. After Emily gave birth, Gavin and Emily got married and had 2 more kids. This story takes place a couple years after Emily had her 3rd child. Me and Caleb were living in a 3-story house, and Emily, Gavin, Xavier, James, and Bella all came to visit for a couple weeks. They were planning on moving into the area, so they stayed at her house while they looked around for houses. About 1 week after they settled in, we started hearing knocks coming from outside of the house. Xavier was the oldest of Emily and Gavin's children. During this, he was 10, James was 7, and Bella was 6. Xavier had his own room, while James and Bella shared a room. Xavier started telling Emily and Gavin that he heard knocks on his window. He was on the 2nd story of the house, with James and Bella across the hall. Caleb and I were in the master bedroom on the 3rd story, and Emily and Gavin were in another room on the 3rd story. Since Xavier was on the 2nd story of the house, everyone told him it was just his imagination, right? I would always stay up much later than everyone else and often heard knocking and a kind of scraping sound outside. I would hear a metal object being lightly tapped on the windows around the house. This went on for a couple of nights. Around the 5th night, we decided to do something about it. All of the adults stayed up late watching movies and talking. We started hearing the knocking at around 2 or 3 in the morning. When we heard it starting, we all looked at each other and whispered. We decided to split up. Me and Emily went to look around all the windows, while Gavin and Caleb separated to look around the front and backyards. We had given up after a while, and Gavin and Caleb came back inside. Xavier then came running down to where we were crying. He told us that someone had thrown a rock at the window and tried to get him to go down. We asked if he knew who it was, and he told us that he didn't recognize the figure. Caleb and Gavin went outside, while Emily went back with Xavier to his room. I stood alone in the living room and decided to look at the window to my right. What I saw still haunts me to this day. And I've always wondered what would have happened if I did not look out that window. What I saw was an outline of a girl standing outside of my window holding a knife. Just then, the front door opened and I screamed. Caleb and Gavin were coming inside and asked me what was going on. I quickly yelled, "Shut the front door and lock it right now!" They did, and looked behind me to see the girl walking to go around the house and to the front door. When she made it to the front door, she started banging on it and screaming Gavin's name. "Why'd you do this to me? How could you? I thought you loved me, Gavin! How could you?" she yelled. I looked at Caleb, then to Gavin, and I'll never forget the look on his face as he was realizing who it was. It was the girl that went to my brother's football games. Her and Gavin would always hang out, and she had always liked him. He forgot who she was until this. His face showed horror. He was frozen in place. Emily came running down with her children, quickly following behind her. We were all just standing there wondering how the heck this girl got Gavin's location and why she still wanted him after all this time. I remember that we were all at a blank, and I ran out to get my phone so I could call the police. They got there in about 15 minutes and arrested the girl. It's been 5 years, and I only remember this because Xavier brought it up asking what had happened that day. I told him everything, and he was shocked. I've always wondered what it would have been like if things hadn't happened the way they did. What if that girl had got inside of my house and killed us all? What if she didn't knock on our windows and our walls as a warning? Anyways, crazy girl that I can't even remember the name of. Let's never meet again. He's still not over me. This happened at the beginning of this year, over the course of 3 months. I broke up with my ex-boyfriend the last week of December. I realized that he was kind of a shitty person and he was getting way too clingy and annoying. But I won't get too much into our relationship. First, it started with constant texts. He begged me to come back to him, saying how much he loved me and that he couldn't live without me. I would get around 20 messages in a course of 2 hours, multiple times a day. Then he would start calling me. It didn't matter where. I could be at work, sleeping, etc., and he would still blow up my phone. I blocked him, but unfortunately, this escalated things. In mid-January, I noticed a car that looked exactly like his would drive by my house every so often. Now, the first few times it happened, I thought it was a coincidence. He didn't live near me. He lived about 45 minutes away in another town. One night, I heard a car idling outside for an hour or so. I saw it was his and instantly felt sick to my stomach. I woke my mother up, and she went outside to get him to leave. He finally did after the police had to escort him off of the property. At the time, I worked in a strip club, which he did not like at all. He would message me from a burner and tell me he's coming to see me. I warned the bouncers about him. The bouncers kicked him out. I think the worst night was in February. I was about to fall asleep when I heard knocking on my window. I had no doubt in my mind it was him. My whole body was numb. It felt like my soul left my body momentarily. I hid under my blankets and called the police. Luckily, I live right by the station, so they were there within 5 minutes and he was charged with trespassing. At this point, I tried to get a restraining order, but I guess the laws in my state are fucked. My only options were to move away and change my number. I moved a month after all of the antics ended in March. Maybe he gave up and moved on. I'm still on edge from it all, though. Let's not ever meet again. He touched my child. A few years ago, my ex-husband and I were eating at the mall with my 2-year-old daughter. She was happily munching on a cookie and watching Yo Gabba Gabba on my phone. This old Japanese man, probably 70 years old, walks up to us and starts commenting on how pretty she is and how she looks so healthy. I say thank you. Old people always love adorable kids, so I don't freak out immediately. He then proceeds to stroke her cheek and run his hands through her hair and talks about how we should bring her to his office because he is a pediatrician and would love to treat her. I picked her up from the high chair and hold her in my lap so he won't touch her again. My ex-husband tried to politely give cues for him to go the fuck away, but he doesn't take the hint. Then, while I'm holding her, he bends over and runs his hand over her leg and gives her this creepy smile and says, "It's okay, I'm a pediatrician." I scoot back, glaring as I say, "Don't touch my fucking kid," and stand up to start putting her in her stroller. We leave and he follows us out to the car asking to play with my daughter. A few weeks pass, and I go back to the same mall and end up bumping into him again. This time my ex-husband was at work. So I'm in Sephora and picking up some makeup, and I have my back turned for a minute and I hear, "Mommy?" And I turn to see the fucker holding my daughter. I get her back from him and loudly say, "Get the fuck away from my child," and go to mall security to tell them. They couldn't find him. After that, we never went back to the mall. So, creepy old fuck? Let's not meet.